All right, Jeff Cohen, we are off on a new endeavor with the Heart of Sports, doing a little digest midweek, somewhere in between when we hit the live show, preview what we'll have on the live show potentially during that. First thing I guess we're going to have to do is come up with a name, right? We can't just call it the Heart of Sports. That knocks off our main show, right?
No, you have to come up with something else. I mean, I've given you a bunch of different names. You bounced some ideas off of me. I think maybe we should let the listeners have a little chance to comment and tell us how bad all the names are that we suggested, and maybe come up with a better one.
Yeah, we'll let them suggest some too, and then maybe we'll
Mhm.
narrow it down and throw a poll up on the Heart of Sports account. Get a little interactive with people and come up with something. But we figured that this would
Nothing like a poll in the middle of a pandemic, huh?
poll during a pandemic. There's nothing
Uh-huh.
better to do. But we figured that this would be good because sometimes, it's a little long for us to go a week apart without talking sports and things happen and we don't want it to become stale. So we want to make sure we get to them, right?
You got it.
All right. I messaged you on Sunday night asking if
Mhm.
you were watching Lance, the documentary. We've been watching lots of documentaries lately. We watched The Last Dance, which we'll talk about in a minute. I was watching. You were not at the time, but you said you were going to get to it.
Oh, I
And then
got
you
you.
you got to it last
Yeah.
night unexpectedly for how long it was.
So I got a question for you. As you watch this, how long did it take before your jaw dropped? And
Well, I mean,
did at
the
any
first
point after that did your jaw actually regain its normal form, or did you just sit there with your mouth agape the whole time, going, "How do these people keep saying these are the most tone deaf group of individuals I've ever seen?"
Well, okay, the first thing was I still can't get over the fact that you can curse like this on TV. I don't know why. Does that make me old that I just didn't expect him to drop a bunch of F bombs the second that they came in on the screen with him, like right away?
Yeah, well, I think you can watch it either way. So if you're worried about little kids and you want to watch on the other channel,
My
that's
my
fine.
my virgin ears with two children will not be able to handle said
Yeah,
language.
I
But no,
hate.
I told you when I watched it, I got the sense that this was an effort to justify doping. That was just a feeling that I had. Didn't really change my opinion of Lance Armstrong. I know this will not surprise you. I watched the Tour de France like
Hmm.
every year. I just enjoyed watching it. I was in college. I would watch it and have a good time. I remember the rise of him. I remember that year where there were questions about him the year after they had the problems with the large scale doping on the tour. So I don't know that I was terribly surprised to find out that there was doping in cycling, but the lengths that they go to sort of say like, it was okay, no big deal. It just surprised me a little bit. What was your take on what we saw?
I was going to twist your word instead of it being an effort to legitimize doping. I think it was an effort to legitimize dopes. I,
Oh,
I just think that the community of cyclists are tone deaf. I think that Lance Armstrong's parents are tone deaf. I think Lance Armstrong is beyond tone deaf.
yeah, his
But
parents you were not a fan of at all.
well, we all know my position on a large number of sports parents. This was amazing to see. First, it was, I don't know if, I guess it was his stepdad, the father that adopted him. So it's not
Yes.
his paternal father, but it's the first father that adopted him. And the guy goes explaining why he's on the birth certificate. I don't know why we needed to know that, but sure. But his almost pride with explaining that, yeah, I might have done some stuff to him that you might not approve of, but look where it got him,
Yeah, he wouldn't have gotten there
was
without me. Like
was
what?
really quite amazing to see the look of pride on his face as he said it. I mean, did I read that wrong?
I couldn't tell whether that was a cultural thing in terms of that was what parenting was. I mean, you always tell me I'm the young guy and it's a
Yeah.
different time and stuff. So I don't know. That's just not what I'm familiar with parenting. That wasn't how I was
Yeah,
brought
but
up with my parents.
even if that was back then, which I don't necessarily think it was, at some point you become enlightened. You change with the times. You understand, oh, the things you might have done different or did wrong, and you might want to do differently if you had to do it over again. what comes out in a lot of the documentaries we're seeing, especially with sports figures, is the lack of understanding of regret. There's a sense of weakness in saying that you regret things or you do it differently, as opposed to a sense that maybe you've grown as a person by understanding that. And the same thing came across kind of with his mom, who had this tone deafness for cheating, from basically encouraging or allowing the cheating to happen, where he would enter into these triathlons at an age younger than was permissible, and then explaining it away, saying, yeah, I kind of understand why they have these age limits, as if it was an insurance issue and a liability issue, as opposed to, no, this is exactly what we don't want parents to do, is to put pressure on their children at a younger age than's necessary. So this kid was competing in high profile competitions at an age that they that he shouldn't have been doing it with adults. I mean, it wasn't like he was competing with kids that were a year older than him, and he just got in under the deadline. These were adults he was competing with, and then adults that he was going to like the Bahamas and wrecking the guy who was tasked with taking care of him while I was there, basically as his chaperone. He then basically trashes the moped that he gets, and the guy calls Lance's mom, and Lance's mom basically blows the guy off. And you could see that there was this sense of entitlement that he had from a very early age. Oddly, in sports you don't expect to see it in.
Yeah, I didn't expect anything else from him. That was just always the sense that I got. He came across in this documentary exactly how he seemed to me throughout the process, not really remorseful for what he's done. And it seems like in the next episode, part 2, you're going to see where they talk to him about it, and he says it's complicated. He doesn't believe it's
Wait,
black
what's
and white.
complicated?
The whole thing about
cheated?
his legacy, his cheating versus what he did to raise awareness for cancer. How do you balance those things? He does not view it as black and white, as I did wrong, therefore I was wrong. It's I did wrong, but there's all these other things. So it's just not as easy to say that I did wrong. You kind of likened it, not the same, but in the Last Dance documentary, Pippen didn't really want to admit that he was wrong for not going back in the game, even though he admitted it at a different time that he was wrong. It was really weird how these guys get on camera and they just don't want to take a step back from the position they had all along.
Yeah, but did Lance Armstrong not understand how he was going to come across? Unless there's been some very creative editing to this, there's no way that he's going to be able to claim this is taken out of context.
See,
he was just arrogant.
I got the sense, though, that Lance Armstrong knows that that's who he is. Like, he all along seemed like that arrogant, self-confident, cocky guy who, I'm going to do it. I mean, if you look at the interview that they did with his wife, where he said, I'm an easygoing guy, and she just made this face behind him like, who are you and what are you saying?
Right.
I don't know that he's potentially rewriting his legacy as a nice guy. I think he's just writing his legacy as justifying his actions. Seems to be
so you
his
think
intent
he's just
here.
digging in, that he's just decided, look, nobody's ever going to like me, so I'm just going to dig in and be this like a basically, I'm put it in terms you would understand. So like one of the bad guy wrestlers.
Yeah, he's going to embrace his character. If you're going to be the heel, be the heel.
But he's a person. He's not a character.
But he's not. He's a cyborg. He's literally, his whole life has been about, it seems like, this drive to have this. And it seems like he's unable to let go of that piece to actually be the human that comes across in it. It seemed very, I don't even know what the word is. He was so matter of fact about it. He's like, yeah, I did it. Of course I did it. Why wouldn't I do it? It's just like, how dare you question me for doing it, is how I felt watching it.
But, I'm always baffled when athletes and politicians and other just people in general walks of life don't understand when they've done something wrong or can't be contrite about it. There's an added component to this that makes it even more baffling to me, which is, this is a guy who came very close to losing his life. He had to battle a very difficult illness. and came back from it. And yet, instead of saying, here was my opportunity to do something different, he's digging in and making it worse for himself. And quite frankly, he's making it worse for the charity that he took responsibility for. If I'm somebody who was inclined to donate to a charity like that, and I have in the past, after watching this, as much as I'm going to want to donate to some cancer charity, this is not the one that I'm going to be doing it for, because he is such a difficult person to like or care about, which is almost impossible for somebody who's gone through what he went through. I mean, it
Are you gonna
really is. He's so unlikable despite you wanting to like him because of his life story.
are you gonna watch part two?
Of course I am. I didn't say it wasn't compelling. Look, I love studying human nature. I find this all fascinating. I just don't understand how somebody thinks like this. Like, I don't understand the logic of why you would continue to take this position even now. Like, even when he tells the story about how people in a bar or a restaurant are heckling him and calling him a cheater, and that's when he decides to drop a bazillion F-bombs. He tells a story about, he goes to the owner and says, hey, look, I'd like you to pay for their dinner. All I ask you to do is tell them that I'm paying for it, and some comment. That would be considered something of class, but even the way he tells the
Yeah, he didn't
story
do it in a classy way.
makes
He did it in a rub it in your
exactly.
face way, like here, I'll buy all your drinks and make sure you know I did it type
Yeah,
thing.
he basically did it so he could drop one more F-bomb, is what it
Yes,
is. So it was
pretty
his way of
much.
saying F you back to them.
Yes, that was his way to do that. And it's funny because it kind of leads into the next thing we want to talk about with The Last Dance, in terms of these guys trying to write the story the way that they want to be known. You have a problem with something that came out this week. What was it? Video from 2011 of Michael Jordan talking about how he didn't want Isaiah on the dream team, and your thought is about how that potentially undermines some of the other things that are said in this documentary. Give me your take on The Last Dance. Last Dance.
Okay, so first off, Michael Jordan was quite clear in the documentary during his interview. This isn't in the past. He has a chance to have the clarity of time. And yet, during his many, many hours of sit down, he makes it clear, I had nothing to do with Isaiah Thomas. There's this clear feud that has not subsided after all these years. And he says, I had nothing to do with him not being on the dream team. Okay. Now it comes out that he, on a podcast, I don't know if it was a podcast or radio show or whatever it was, about 8, 9 years ago, bragged that he did. That he talked to Rod Thorne and said, I'm not playing on the dream team if he is. And now there's other things that are said in it, which I really don't understand, because he talks about Chuck, and they keep saying it's Chuck Daly, not Charles Barkley, that he kind of agreed. And I don't know how that was, because Chuck Daly was
Wasn't
Isaiah
Chuck Daly his
Thomas's
coach?
coach, and was almost like a father figure to him. So I don't, and seemed like a classy guy. I mean, Chuck Daly was a revered coach. I mean, look how he handled even Dennis Rodman when he was on the Pistons. And so I don't really understand how Michael Jordan takes this position now, when it's clear that he did have something to do with it. And so then the question becomes, is you opened the door to something I was concerned about with this documentary from the outset, which was Michael Jordan had some final say to some of the
Which
things
is
that are happening.
which is what seemed like it was his goal all along, that The Last Dance was basically his chance to get the last word.
Hmm.
But these words that are coming out afterwards, be it the people with Horace Grant objecting to him being the leak to the reporter in Chicago,
Right.
or the reporter in Chicago saying, well, some of these things he said just aren't true, or Michael on tape himself contradicting what Michael on tape himself says now.
Right.
Did he give himself the last word, or by trying to take the last word, did he open himself up for a whole new round of criticism?
I think he opened himself up to criticism, but what's unfortunately, I think, is he opened up everybody else who was involved in it to the criticism. And I don't blame them. I blame him for not being honest with them. Now, I guess you could say they could have found this tape because it was public, but he should have been honest because he's now put them in a position. If Michael Jordan didn't have this approval over this, it'd be one thing. But by having approval over it, it's cast a shadow over parts of this documentary as to whether it's a documentary film that can be perceived as objective. Because Michael Jordan has sat down and supposedly had final say over certain things. And I don't know what he had final say over, what he didn't, but he sat down and told a fib. I mean, it's pretty darn clear he did. And I don't know what I always try to figure out what is it you have to gain when you're telling the lie. I'm not sure what he had to gain by telling the lie. Everybody, isn't it pretty much common knowledge that Isaiah Thomas wasn't on the team because of Michael Jordan? Like, why would he fight this? Now?
Well, sometimes it's the smallest hills that you choose to die on that end up being the biggest mountains.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there was no reason for him to do it. He just should have owned it and said, look, I didn't want to play with Isaiah. What's the big deal with that? Everybody knows that already.
It. Well, see, that's it. We've all assumed it. But what I don't like, and I've heard this from several other shows, is especially the Chicago people, all making apologies for this, saying, well, you know what, we all knew it before, so it's not a big deal. No, it's still a big deal. The fact that he lied is a big deal. You don't just blow it off and say it's not a story because we all know it's a lie. We know it's a lie. He had a chance to fess up to it, and he chose not to. And in a 10-hour documentary, it was a large focus, right? I mean, this was not a tiny part of the story.
They went back to it a few times.
Right.
Does it make you think differently about the whole thing you saw? Or you already had those questions to start. Before we did our first interviews, before we saw the first show, you raised the question about Jordan having final sign-off. I don't remember whether it was a conversation we had on the air on 610 ESPN or a conversation we had when we were prepping for the show. But you said to me all along, I don't know if I like Michael having the last say on this.
Yes, I was uncomfortable with it. And this is exactly why I was uncomfortable with it, because it puts everybody else that's on that team that spent hundreds, if not thousands of hours putting this together. It causes people to question the hard work and objectivity they had because they let Michael have final say over certain things. And Michael chose to use that opportunity to give his own narration or his own story that he knew not to be true.
All right, let's leave that there. I want to talk some baseball with you. Before we do it, on our live show Friday on 610 ESPN, we've got some special baseball stuff coming up. Jeff, I know you're excited for this one. We're going to talk a little Doc Halladay.
And some hockey, don't forget.
All right, well,
hockey. Yeah.
So I'll do the baseball plug first, and then you can do the hockey plug.
All right.
We're going to have MLB.com Phillies beat reporter Todd Zalecki joining us to talk about the state of baseball, which you and I will get into in a second with their salary proposal. And
are you loving the book?
I am. Yeah. I am loving the book. His new book, Doc, The Life of Roy Halladay. He doesn't shy away from anything at all in this book. And it is
and he talked to a lot of people. And it always amazes me that
he talked to over 100 people for this book, including like every catcher that ever caught Roy. And that was fun to me to see that happen, to see those stories.
You said every catcher. So I haven't gotten to that point. Did he talk to Tuffy Ghostwitch?
Oh, you're gonna have to go back and read it for you.
Remember, there was
may not be every catcher.
Years ago, Tuffy Ghostwitch was a guy who was on Lakewood. He was an Australian guy. I think he was from Australia, and he caught.
Of course, you would know that
in a spring training game and talked about what an experience it was.
By the way, if you're not following Jeff and his baseball fandom, he is keeping you updated on the Korean baseball organization, Aaron Altair. Did your jersey come yet?
No, it did not yet. Well, it's in the States. It just hasn't made it to the Philadelphia area yet. But they are 15-3 after Aaron Altair just hit another 3-run homer the other night for last night.
Look at that. Look at that. You are just enjoying this a little too much, but baseball is trying to ruin the fun for you because they want to come back themselves.
How dare you say to me that I'm enjoying any sport too much?
I'm taking pleasure out of the fact
man
that
who
they
would watch shuffleboard or bocce ball if he had the
see.
opportunity.
But in my mind, this
Yeah.
takes away the ability for you to critique those life choices of me because you have now
No,
made the same.
no, because we are in a unique time where we have no
Oh,
other live sports, and this is baseball. This is
so
not
you
a
get a
sport.
pass.
This is not a sport that's going to end up on the Ocho. This is
So you
actually a legitimate top four sport. It just happens that it's being played outside of our country right now.
so you get a pass on this. Okay, I see how it is. Well,
No, it's not a pass.
let's talk about the guys who want to play in the States, or as if you listen to the radio, a battle of billionaires versus millionaires.
All
Jeff,
right.
are you enjoying the new Major League Baseball salary proposal that has gone out there? By the way, how is it that hockey comes up with a plan and releases it? NBA is doing stuff. Every detail of Major League Baseball's proposal leaks before it even goes someplace. It's all out there.
And it's not good. I mean, I understand what the owners are trying to do, and it actually does create some. What it does, what they're trying to do is create a situation that it's fair or more goes to the bottom portion of the people on the salary food chain. But what it actually does, and the skeptic in me then says, was this a proposal where they were pitting players against players? So they're pitting the majority of players that don't make most of the money against the few that make the most amount of money.
That's what it seems like.
Yeah, and that's not good. And what concerns me about this is this particular labor discussion that always goes on between just baseball more than any other sport is so frustrating, because right now I don't want to blame either side. What I want to do is I want both sides to realize this is a unique time. Can you just deal with whatever it is this season's going to be without all of this, without all of this strife? Because people are suffering and people don't want to hear either one of them. I'm not blaming either side. I'm blaming both sides, because both sides just are acting the same way they would act if this was just a general labor discussion or labor strike.
It seems like they're having next year's labor negotiation right now.
Right. And what they should do is they should be getting together and saying, look, whatever it is we do this year will not be brought up in any labor discussions. We will not use this as a jumping off point. This is a 1 year, 1 season unique thing, and that's it. This is not some place that you can dare say this is where we're starting from. You cannot say, well, but this is the way we did it. You have to be able to put this into its own bubble. And by the way, if they're going to do this, the one thing that I have a really big problem with the owners is that the majority of professional baseball players aren't even addressed in this proposal.
Does that surprise you, though? Isn't that the way it always is?
The minor leaguers, the guys that literally, you want to talk a little living paycheck to paycheck.
Before we get to the minor leaguers, though, I have a former major leaguer question. Will my favorite day still exist?
Yeah.
Will Bobby Bonilla get his $1 million?
Bobby. Of course he will.
Will that be prorated too?
No, that will not be prorated.
So he's going to end up
making
making more money than guys on the field, literally this year.
Yeah, likely.
Because of that. Okay, now we can go on.
Look at the grin on your face as we're talking. You just love this, Bobby. This once a year, Bobby. What is the actual date that Bobby Bonilla gets that check? Usually,
July 1st, I think.
Okay, all right.
It's Bobby Bonilla Day.
So
I have to double check that, and it doesn't make me happy. It's just the worst contract I've ever seen in the history of anything. It does surprise me though, and I think that the point that baseball will probably get to is where, why can't they put the money in escrow or something where they have if we sell so many tickets, then this happens. It seems like this is just a first proposal for negotiating purposes. If I'm looking at it,
we don't have that kind of time though. They don't have time to start from the furthest possible positions. They have to be getting back in and having spring training part 2. And they're not doing that. They're starting at a point that's only going to make it, because you know what's going to happen now. The Players Association is going to come out with just as ridiculous proposal, because they have to start. This is what happens with negotiations. You either have two people that are going to sit down and say, okay, we're each going to have to give up something. Both sides are going to be equally. The best settlement is always where both sides are equally unhappy.
This is
Okay?
why I brought my litigator to the show. So
That's
you
right.
can tell me how these things work,
That's
Jeff.
that's how it works. And if you have two practical people sitting down and realizing that, then it gets done. And if you have two people that have tremendous egos, which is what we have here, you then have one side that's sitting and saying, I'm going to give you the worst proposal that's good for us. And then they're going to come back, and that just creates more work. And it also creates more hostility, which makes it harder to get it done. And all you're doing is wasting time getting to where you really need to get to.
And as you mentioned, it doesn't address the majority of the players who are in the minor leagues and are potentially going to be left with nothing right now.
And you know, there's a group of former players, and I hope we get to talk to one in the next couple of weeks that have gotten together to deal with this issue. The advocates for the people who don't have advocacy, because a lot of these guys don't even have agents. They don't have a union in minor league baseball right now. So if they don't go and they don't play and they don't work out, they don't get paid. Period. And so what are they supposed to do?
They don't get service time either.
Yeah, well, that's not my biggest. Service time is always you can play with service time. But do you know how much it would be per club per month? $300,000. That is a drop in the bucket. You have to pay these guys, because you're now going to expect them to you're going to snap their fingers and next year they're just going to come back? Shouldn't they be working out now?
Well, that's what I thought. Aren't they going to have them where like the AA and AAA guys are kind of scrimmaging against each other? I mean, you're going to have people to be able to bring up when guys get hurt. Yes, they may have expanded benches and stuff when they do come back, but there are injuries in baseball in a regular season. In a short season where there hasn't been regular prep time, you're going to see injuries, and you're going to see the depth of some of these teams tested.
All I saw today was the Oakland A's said they're not paying their minor leaguers this season.
Which is just a terrible, terrible precedent.
I'm not suggesting they shouldn't pay all the concession people and all those people. They should. But if they have the money for that, shouldn't you also have it for the actual players that are going to make up the future of your league? Do you really want to put them to the point that they will be destitute? I mean, these guys dedicate so much time and sacrifice so much to do this game and get paid so little. I mean, look, we've been to minor league stadiums where the people in the concessions make as much as some of the ball players that are on the field. If you're not a top 3 or 4 round pick, you're getting virtually nothing.
It's okay, but let's get to let's cut to the end of this. They're going to have to come up with a deal, right? They can't be the only league that fights over millions of dollars while hockey and basketball are back on the court and the ice. Can they?
Look, I don't want that to happen, but sure they can.
That would hurt baseball so much worse in the long run than just playing under this. These guys aren't that foolish. I refuse to believe that they can be that foolish.
Okay, fine. I hope they're not that foolish, but I know that they can be.
Is this the young me being naive? Is that what's going on here right now?
Yes, because you really didn't live through any of the labor strikes before.
No, I did. I lived through 94, 95 because my dad stopped watching.
Yeah, how old were you?
Me? Now I'm 41.
No, then you were a teenager.
Yeah, I was a huge fan at that point.
You might have been smart, but you didn't really you didn't understand economics when you were a teenager.
I didn't understand the economics, but what I understood was my dad, who was a fan who I used to go to, didn't want to go to games anymore because he didn't want to go see the rich people fight over money. And that was something that actually
So now
happened.
the rich people are fighting over money at a time that is much worse than that time.
It's a bad look. Even if they're all right for what they're doing, and I'm not taking a side on it for purposes of this conversation, it's a bad PR look right now when you got, 30 plus million, 40 million people on unemployment, people who can't get it, people worrying about their next check. You guys are saying, nope, I won't take 5 million. Nope, not going to do that.
Yeah, I just don't understand. Look, every team has PR people, and unfortunately, the PR people are usually not included in the negotiations of labor deals. And they should be, because those are the smartest people in the room, because they will sit there and they understand the fans. They understand what keeps the game alive. And they need to get in a room and say to both sides, look, you really got to stop this. The fact is, you're going to kill the game. And here's how the rest of the world looks at you. While you live in your bubble, in your big houses, you're not understanding what's going on with the rest. And look, some of them are doing great work with charities, but they still don't understand how people react to the things that they are doing.
I'm going to let that be the last word on the actual sports for our first bite-sized show. Jeff, give a little tease for our Friday show on 610 ESPN at 4 p.m.
You already gave the Todd Zalecki tease. Who knows who might show up, but we do know who else is showing up, which is Charlie O'Connor from The Athletic is coming back on the show to talk about the league that has figured it out and appears ready to go back and is going to start, which is the NHL. So we're going to talk Flyers, who are a top 4 seed in this proposal, and whether the Flyers have a chance and how this is all going to work.
I can't wait for it. I hope people join us Friday at 4 p.m. Jeff, I hope everybody helps us come up with a name for this from our little home studios that we're doing. Let's keep talking sports, okay?
Sounds good.
All right. Have a good one, everybody.